Good morning, readers.
Hello, BookTube. It's Ros from Scully Dandling About the Books.
And Tilly from Tilly's Shelf, that channel that never posts any videos anymore.
But still reading.
Yeah, still reading. And we're back for another discussing drama.
Yeah.
And we said in advance, didn't we? We decided to announce our first 3 months of discussing drama, and we're slightly late for January, but that was because we wanted to be able to do it together.
So because we knew we were meeting up at the very beginning of February, we saved recording this to do it, live rather than on Zoom, because it's much nicer.
Yeah, it's more natural.
And our January play for discussing drama was this one.
6 Characters in Search of an Author by Luigi Pirandello, translated from the Italian.
Yeah. Now, and this play has been translated multiple times. I read a translation that was done in the 1950s by Frederick May, just because this was the copy
we found it in a second-hand bookshop nearby, and that was when we decided that we were going to read it.
Exactly. And you read a different translation, and there are multiple translations.
I read one that's available on Gutenberg, free online.
Yeah. So, and to give the sort of very basic background to this book is the author, Luigi Pirandello, is Italian. He was born in 1867.
Mm-hmm. And this came out in 1921, so just after the First World War.
Yeah. And he wrote he worked in a family chemical engineering factory. So he did all sorts of things. But he started writing when he was about 20, and he wrote poems, and he wrote novels, and he wrote plays, and he really kind of got more and more into the theatre as his sort of primary sort of type of writing. And so he'd have been 54 when this came out, so it's a middle-aged writer's bit of writing when he's perhaps kind of in the prime of his writing life.
Yeah, and you can tell that he's very confident in his ability as a writer, as well as being a little bit not self-deprecating, but able to laugh at himself.
Yes.
Able to make little jokes against himself.
Absolutely. And he was James Joyce was someone who sort of took him up and got him published in English, I think. Right, so he was in that sort of modernist kind of movement. Yeah.
And he wound up getting a Nobel Prize for Literature in 1934 for the body of his
body of work.
Yeah. Work of the years.
So this is a sort of modern Italian classic.
Yeah.
And described as being theatre of the
absurdist
theatre.
Yeah. Which very much so, I think.
Yes. I don't think we disagree with that as a way of describing this play. And bearing in mind that this was 1921, it's very it would have been very fresh, groundbreaking, and it's striking, and it's still to read it now, but it much more so then.
In a way, it works a lot around breaking the fourth wall kind of stuff, and you can tell that this was perhaps a little bit more innovative and original and challenging at the time than it is now. It's slightly less controversial now, I suppose, the way that he handles working with the
breaking of the fourth wall. Although, as we said to each other, that thing of breaking the fourth wall is something, and the idea of a play within a play, which is
very much what it is.
To this, Shakespeare did a play within a play, or so
it's happened before.
There's things that dramatists naturally find themselves doing, which is playing with the idea of drama.
Yes.
But this probably there's something about that period after the First World War when people were questioning things, when reacting against a sort of what had been perhaps a more traditional period,
formulaic, or
particularly in the theatre, I think, sort of even more so than in the novel. I mean, you out there may correct me and point me to amazingly innovative sort of Victorian Edwardian period drama, but it felt like this was a reaction, and reflected its times, put it that way. Talking about it, we should say right now, we're already 4 minutes in, we're not going to worry about spoilers in terms of this play.
Although one thing I would say is that having read this play, I would recommend seeing it rather than reading it. I think it's much more of an enjoyable play to watch. And I felt like now that I've read it, I'll enjoy watching it less, if that makes sense. I'd rather have watched it first.
Yes, I would have loved to have come to this as a performance,
Yeah.
knowing
Completely
nothing
without
about it.
expecting, without having any expectations.
Yeah, so if you know that you could see a performance of this,
Stop the video.
Stop now. Don't join in with this. Don't and
go and watch it and then come back.
Because yes, I'd have liked to do it that way around,
Yeah.
more so than a number of the other plays that we read for our
Yeah.
discussing drama series.
Yeah.
This was one I thought, oh, what a shame.
Yeah, there's other plays that we've read together that I thought, oh, I'd love to now see that. Whereas now this one, I feel like I wish I'd seen it before I'd read it. Yeah. Because of the way that it uses sort of humour and occasionally shock factor, and the way that the characters in the story interact, and there's this set up premise that you've just arrived and you're watching a rehearsal, and the rehearsal gets interrupted, and I think not knowing what to expect from that would be
I think the first audiences, and we need to explain a little bit more about the structure so this makes sense, but the first audiences would have come into like a theatre and sat down and thought, that's odd, the lights are up, there's no curtain across,
there's no scenery, no real scenery,
people they're sort of milling around on the stage, what's going, you'd have had a real
sense of confusion
that would have been great to actually have that sense of confusion.
And your expectations of what you were coming to see would have been really,
it's like, oh, they're not ready, have I arrived too early? What's going on? And then it moves into the beginning of a rehearsal, and you start to understand, oh right, there's a play being rehearsed here, and there's a group of actors, and and always and so the leading lady's late, and and all the prompt persons there, and you sort of drawn into, oh, this is what we're doing. What we're doing is we're seeing actors getting ready to perform a play.
Yeah.
And then 6 characters appear in search of an author through the audience.
Yeah.
So the audience should be very involved. You're in a sense, the audience for this play is part of the action. In that way that things come through you, and
at the start. But I feel like that's an aspect that is possibly lost as the play goes on.
Yeah, that's true.
That doesn't. It never really re-emerges from that beginning point.
Yes. Although at the end, when one of the characters storms off, they go through the audiences and out the theatre, like really exit, as it were. So, but yes,
as opposed to exit stage left, they
exactly,
exit the
really
building.
exit. So these 6 characters turn up, and they say that they need an author to write their story, because an author has started writing about them and kind of brought them into being, and
then given up on the story,
and
leaving them in a kind of state of suspended
animation.
Their story hasn't been completed and hasn't been released to the world, but they exist and they know what's happened to them and what's going to happen to them.
Yeah. And so they've come along to try and get this theatre company to
act them and be their author,
and be them, and then that's, and of course initially the key figure in the theatre company, in different translations he gets labelled different things, so the producer or the stage manager or the director, doesn't really matter. But if I say, I'll probably say the producer because that's what it was called.
I'll say the manager because that's what it was in my translation. But they're the same person.
But that character and the actors, initially they think, who are these people? Is this some kind of joke? Are you having us on? Are you're disrupting? We're busy doing important rehearsing here, and you're getting in the way.
But part of the joke is that they don't actually really like the play that they're working on, which is a play by Pirandello. So they're like, oh, audiences seem to like it, but
that is one of the nice features, that this could be, because this is very ideasy, and you could start to find it a bit pretentious.
Yes.
Which I think perhaps slightly you did.
It kind of errs on the side of pretentiousness at times.
But he right from the start kind of subverts that a bit by laughing
it with a sense of humour.
And laughing at himself as a playwright. It's like, oh well, I don't really take myself too seriously. So which is nice. But eventually the producer kind of gets with they get intrigued by the characters, because the characters start sort of
revealing little bits of the story. And for the audience as well, I'd imagine this would be when you're starting to think, oh, are we going to get to hear this story? Are we going to find out what actually happened to this stepdaughter and the father and the mother and all these other children? And
what are all the big events that mean this is, it sets up that there's kind of conflict and drama in the character story that you want.
You want to find out what it is. And the frustration of the play is that you never quite get there. Like, you get little, you do, like, in the end you can string together what that story is, but the point of the play is not to actually tell you that story. It's to to talk around that story.
And so what is it really about then, if it's not about that story?
Well, it's about reality
and illusion.
And illusion, yes.
Yeah. And what is reality? How do we know things are real?
Who are you?
Yes. What's really real?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Is art, or can art be more real than reality by presenting, I suppose, by distilling the strength of emotion or certain concepts or something.
One of the ways that it sort of says that is that the actors, the actors who are playing actors,
as opposed to the actors who are playing characters,
yes, who then will go on. The actors who are playing actors say that when they play the characters, because they're actors, they will play those characters in a way that is more real than the characters themselves.
Yeah, even though the characters have this feeling, well, she'll never be me because she'll never be able to quite get my mannerisms right, or she just doesn't look like me, and they're like, oh well, makeup's going to do all of that and things like how to create that new representation of
and person. So that all sounds a lot of fun, but it does, there is a sort of a more philosophical feeling about that. It really is sort of saying, well, that questioning of how do we know our real selves, or who are real, what people really think or really feel, or who they really are. It goes there.
And that comes into the story within the story as well, in that there are characters that used to be connected. There's a father and a mother that have separated and then don't recognize each other at a later stage, or they do, but they don't. The father doesn't recognize his stepdaughter, and that produces problems and family drama. But like this kind of, they should know each other, but they don't, and that recognition is gone. And
I think for that, it seemed important to me that this was a play that was written just after the First World War, at a time when there'd been that sort of, there's a sort of emotional and philosophical disruption in Europe, and you feel that in the play, don't you? Yeah.
I think you're right.
And yes, you were saying about the father and mother and people not recognising it. I mean, he comes very, very close to having sex with his stepdaughter, because he doesn't recognise that, and that's the sort of big.
I wasn't sure. I might be wrong. I wasn't sure whether he came close to it or whether it actually happened.
Oh,
it's never, because it's never kind of explicitly stated, but the anger that the stepdaughter has towards him and the upset of the mother, to me, indicated that although there's a point where the manager's saying, we can't put this on stage, that we've got to draw lines between what the audience will accept us performing on stage, and the stepdaughter saying, well, we're trying to represent what happened here, so if it happened, it's got to happen on stage, and the manager's saying, there's some things that we just can't, that art's not allowed to address at this stage.
Yes, that's a good point. That I assume, because we had what we're told happens is that the mother walks in on this, and so that my impression was that it was just averted, but
I suppose my impression,
it could be
either way.
Yes. So there is drama in the plot, but that's not the main point of the play. The main point of the play is about people's reactions to each other, and that's why it would be I think this would be better in performance than it is to read.
In reading it, because you don't get so much from the moments of humour, there is sort of like, there's a setup period, which is great, and then there's a very long stable period where it just kind of looks at the ideas that it's got about reality and illusion and character formation and things, looks at those from different perspectives, but the tension doesn't really go anywhere, and that's something that you'd get more from seeing it in performance, because you'd see characters' reactions to each other. And
I think an awful lot of this would work in terms of how the actors playing actors and the actors playing characters, how they react and respond to each other, and sort of facial expression. This suggestion of using masks, and that the characters have more fixed expressions, and but yes, I think that would have brought it to life. Because it does, it sort of, it starts well, and then it for a reader it sort of plateaus a bit, and you're having to do a lot. I was doing a lot of thinking, how would you make this work on stage, which is one of the pleasures of reading plays for me, of doing that thinking, but I didn't just get kind of totally carried along with it.
It's not very immersive to read, whereas it might be more so to watch.
And because it's not really, I was going to say it's not a very emotional play. I mean, that's, in some ways that's unfair, because it is about sort of women and relationships, and
the characters are very emotional, and there's a point where the mother's really breaking down in tears, and a point when she faints and so on, but the setup, because it's a kind of detached setup, and then you lose some of the emotion from that, because instead you're saying, we can't change the scenery 4 times in a scene, so we're just going to have to put it all together into the garden, and so you lose that closeness to the human emotion.
Yes, you as a person reading it, or as an audience member, you're because you're constantly being reminded that this is not real. You never feel real emotion for them, because these are not real people, and they're not real lives, and which of course you always know, and this is part of what it is.
But normally you see the point of putting on a play is to make you feel what he says you should feel, like make it feel real and make you really experience those emotions, instead of keeping it sort of at arm's length.
Absolutely, that what we do is we suspend our disbelief and go with it as if it's real. And one of the things that I liked was that it's not just about what's real in drama, in theatre. It's also looking, but what's actually real or not in our real lives, or more. There's a point where the father, who's one of the characters, is talking to the producer or manager, whatever you want to call him, and is saying, you, the theatre company, create an illusion, but for us it's our reality, because we're the characters, and the only reality we know. And then he pauses and takes a step or two towards the producer and adds, but it's not only true in our case, just think it over. Can you tell me who you are? Pointing his finger at him. The producer says, what? Who am I? Well, I'm myself. And they kind of go on to look at how we, all of us, create selves.
And I think the good thing about the producer/manager character is, in a way, he's a stand-in for maybe the audience member, or maybe the kind of the typical person who, he wants to keep that question separate from himself. He doesn't mind, although he goes on, you're philosophizing too much. He doesn't mind the characters debating their level of reality, but he is not interested in taking that debate into his own life, and he's not interested in really analysing what the characters are trying to say. He's just really interested in thinking, okay, let's leave that aside and put on the play. And you can find, at the end, when things do get a bit more dramatic, then he's like, just put the lights out. He doesn't want to engage in that level of emotion and
questioning himself and his, that as someone, he creates illusions on the stage, and that's fine, but he doesn't want to be told that actually
his own life could be an illusion.
Or that we're all creating versions of ourselves and performing versions of ourselves in different situations, which is kind of true.
He'd rather think that they have come as a joke or a prank, and that they've
Yeah.
wasted his time, than properly engage with the question.
So, I think it's a clever play. It's an entertaining play. It's full of interesting ideas. I didn't sort of love it, if you know what I mean.
No, I've enjoyed other plays a lot more, but I enjoyed the thought experiment that it encourages you to go on.
Yes, absolutely. I think, but I was thinking, making a comparison in my head with, we watched Red, Beckett, Happy Days,
yes,
you know, which similarly is very, you know, absurdist and it's sort of experimental. But I actually found that quite an emotional experience to read. So it like that sort of the absurdist sort of approach doesn't necessarily mean you don't get that engagement, as it were. So this, I think, it, you know, this is in the nature of this play, which doesn't make it a bad play. I think it's good, and I'd actually, you know, I think it would be, it's quite brilliant in a way.
It's a play that you could definitely recommend, but like I said, I'd recommend to watch it. I think it's also a play that it's never not going to be relevant. The questions that it asks about reality and illusion and things, like it's like we asked it today about, you know, is virtual reality real? And it's the same question, just moved on a few generations or forms of technology. Is art real? Is virtual reality?
Is the version of Roz who appears on YouTube videos the real Roz? Is this the real Tilly? So, but other people may have different responses. Really interested to hear in the comments if you've read it or seen it and what you think. And also if anyone knows it in the original Italian rather than in translation, because there's always a kind of, you always wonder if, you know,
things are different.
Things are different or in any way lost by reading it in translation. I think not, because it's so much about ideas. I mean, the language is lovely in the sense of it's funny and sharp and lively, but it's not. It's not
the focus of the play.
Yeah. I would say so. I think probably the translation doesn't matter, but
so much as it might do in another play.
Yeah.
Anyway, so talk to us in the comments if you've got any thoughts about 6 characters in search of an author.
And we're rolling on to our February play, which is Pipeline
by Dominique Morisseau.
Bye.